In this video, I'm going to review and rank the Iron Man films one at a time, breaking down the story, the characters, looking really specifically at what I liked and disliked, trying to build my own definitive ranking. I'm not here to change anyone's minds. In fact, I love having dissenting opinions on these movies. It's so fun to discuss and look at from different angles, why people appreciate them for different reasons. It's a little nerve-wracking taking on a project like this. In a way, this franchise has been built up so high that it feels hard to challenge my own opinions on it, but I'm looking forward to taking that closer look, and I hope you guys can enjoy it as well. Over the course of 2022, I plan to do reviews of the full Infinity Saga from the MCU. These are movies that I've just loved for years. Good and bad, I just really enjoy watching and talking about these movies. I've pretty much always been drawn to all superhero movies, but it seemed like a fun task for myself to tackle this specific series within this year. Over time, I've grown less and less confident in my ranking of these movies, so it'll also serve as a great way for me to update my opinions, see what has and hasn't held up, and come up with my definitive ranking of the Infinity Saga, and hopefully in the years to come, all of the MCU. I'm going to be mostly grouping them together, obviously starting here with Iron Man.
Kidding when you say iron?
You know what, don't be like fucking Larry King. That motherfucker, I say iron and he's up my ass for fucking 4 days.
I'll probably have a preamble before diving into many of these MCU reviews, but I expect this one will be a little longer than most, and I think it warrants it. I want to share these details for anyone who is younger than around 13 when Iron Man first came out, or who got into the MCU later on, and may have either forgotten or never known how monumental this movie was. Marvel Comics was in dire straits in the 80s and 90s, and sold off the rights to adapt most of their largest characters and franchises. That's why essentially every pre-MCU Marvel movie was made by random studios with mixed results. Things weren't consistent, we rarely had anything cross over, and Iron Man was one of those sold off characters, originally going to Fox and eventually acquired by New Line. He was a C-list character that came as a packaged deal with actual known superhero IP purchases. Neither studio ever made that movie because pretty well nobody knew or cared about Iron Man. That's hard to picture, but properties like X-Men and Spider-Man were the real rage. If No Way Home has proven anything, that really still is the case. Because nobody did anything with these character rights, they eventually reverted back to Marvel. That was a part of the original deal. And they decided to bet it all, kicking off the live-action Marvel Studios movies with Iron Man 1. When the Iron Man movie was eventually announced, we had a mixed bag of superhero movies ranging from awful to great. There was zero faith that Marvel was going to come out of nowhere with an unknown producer, odd director choice, a washed-up actor, and put together anything worthwhile with their first movie. The Dark Knight was coming out the same year, for crying out loud. Who cares about that powerless billionaire vigilante? The Incredible Hulk came out the same year, and between the two, Feige has stated this was the risk, and Hulk was the safe bet. People at least knew who Hulk was, even if it was a reboot. They rather infamously started filming Iron Man without a finished script. They made these movies without an actual plan for an Avengers franchise. At least, not one that had any guarantees to actually happen. Nowadays, Marvel greenlights a dozen movies at a time. Back then, everything kind of rided on this doing well. Remember that a cinematic universe didn't exist before this. It's hard to look back on now, considering every IP ever has attempted a cinematic universe, but we didn't even have that phrase before this movie. And when stacked up against the Hulk reboot, ironically, Iron Man was the smash hit. With this, Iron Man became the template for this new interconnected universe of heroes, all in terms of production, tone, and humor. What that team did with Iron Man 1 changed the game. Obadiah Stane's line,
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
applies so directly to what Marvel did here. It's insane. They were disadvantaged in every conceivable way, and those limitations are likely what allowed their creativity to take the lead and give us a movie that succeeded in both its own right, while also laying the groundwork for every MCU project that's come since. So regardless of what you think of the Iron Man movies, we have to acknowledge and respect the work of everyone involved, especially in that first movie, for making it work against all odds. So without further ado, let's talk about the first Iron Man coming out back in 2008. I love how quickly this movie kicks off. Maybe I can learn a thing or two from that. The opening sequence is tight, tense, and quickly builds intrigue. It takes all of 10 seconds for us to know and understand Tony and absolutely fall in love with him and Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. He's spilling over with confidence and charisma in every single second of this movie. We have dozens of examples of perfect casting in superhero movies, but I truly believe this is still the GOAT. Look at all the scenes where he's fiddling around in his workshop. Downey somehow has a good rapport with a robotic arm that doesn't speak. I also assume that arm is entirely CGI, which means he's selling me on this goofy banter while literally talking to himself. I love scenes where we briefly see him as a swagger-dripping playboy. The MCU has essentially desexualized every character, only ever interacting with their core love interest. It's such a small inclusion in this movie, but it stood out to me immediately because we simply don't see it anymore. Yeah, the Eternals had the first ever sex scene, but I guess being a womanizer has maybe become too objectionable of a character flaw? I won't dwell on the cultural implications there too much. Tony's living this rock and roll lifestyle with glimpses of him drinking and gambling instead of attending events, partying, womanizing, and hopping on a jet on a whim, ignoring all his responsibilities, and cranking punk and metal music whenever he can. A big part of Tony Stark is what a grade A a-hole he is, and these movies very reluctantly and very briefly ever address that. He's a flawed character, and while I wish we could have seen more of that, I think this movie communicates it somewhat efficiently. I imagine they had to toe a line between being a jerk and still remaining likable. Tony is supposed to be totally broken. Pepper even pokes fun at him by gifting him his own heart. That's touching, funny, and hits close for Tony, and ends up being an important plot point later. That's really well done. It's a great gag and good characterization, and folds into the plot. I've just always appreciated that. Tony has money, power, and his vast intellect, and until he becomes Iron Man, it's all so hollow. So there's some okay writing around the character. I think they could have gone deeper with it and shown how miserable he can actually be, but his untouchable billionaire, charismatic side is all entirely carried by the performance. How about some of the surrounding characters? I absolutely love Jeff Bridges, just in general. He's a brilliant actor, and his portrayal of Stain is along the lines of this corporate yuppie mixed with southern gentleman, with the look and stature of Hugo Strange. While there are issues surrounding the character, especially later in the movie, I cannot fault Bridges. He's charming yet intimidating, but most importantly, disarming. Look at the 4-second scene where he rolls up on a Segway in his 80s style suit smoking a cigar and tell me you don't love this man. Casting such a lovable and talented actor to play the villain was a good call. We didn't necessarily know what to expect. Obadiah Stane isn't going to be that recognizable to people the way that a name like Norman Osborn is. A good example of Bridges' talents come in his cat and mouse scene with Pepper as she's stealing files off this computer. He plays it off amazingly well, but then it's kind of a tad annoying how easily he could have stopped her or had security or someone else detain her once he realized what she was up to. Him then hunting her down becomes like a major plot point and it didn't need to happen. That's a very early, very small complaint surrounding the character. I'll save more for later on. I can't stand Gwyneth Paltrow and her shitty snake oil company, but I'll try to judge her performance and character outside of that. And really, I do buy her chemistry with Tony. Apparently, Downey is capable of having believable chemistry with inanimate objects, but I really do think she contributes well to their back and forth in this movie. The flow of their conversations is always fast and overlapping with this very natural rhythm, showing this understanding the characters have of one another. Although, it's a strange start to a relationship because their dynamic feels a lot like the mother or babysitter of a hyper toddler, the movies never really address how they disentangle that. We don't really get a lot of James Rhodes or Rhodey in this movie, and while I buy into Tony and Rhodey being longtime friends, it's a little sad to see how quickly he seems to bail on Tony considering that. I know Tony is acting rather irrationally, so I guess it's a running theme in the movie that he pushes everyone away, but people are abandoning him when he's clearly going through something traumatic. A scene I still love is Tony outmaneuvering the jets while on the phone with Rhodey. I like having action sequences like this that don't necessarily have a lot of stakes. Yes, Tony could die if he gets shot out of the air, so there's tension in that sense, but we're just getting some cool character work without the villain. I think the scene fits in here well without taking away from those other storylines. And there's some great comedy with Tony trying to hide what he's up to. And we get to show off Iron Man is stronger and more maneuverable than these military-grade jets. Plus, he still gets the heroic moment saving the guy with the parachute malfunction, even if it was his fault. I think the scene just kind of works on every level. I'm curious if other people see it as filler because it's right on a line, but how can you not love it with the incredible gag of the hard cut with the whole training exercise setup?
Training exercise, isn't that the usual BS?
It's not that simple. An unfortunate training exercise involving an F-22 Raptor occurred yesterday.
That's gold. I should get back to talking about the actual character. Terrence Howard is a good fit for this movie. I think he has a cool confidence and swagger that stands up to Tony's own. He'd be a tough guy to be friends with otherwise. We kind of needed a bigger personality to stack up against Tony. I'll unpack the recasting later on in Iron Man 2, so don't worry, that is coming. And I really like that we left things off with this tease of War Machine. It's a really effective setup. Nowadays, these movies often trip over themselves trying too hard to market a different movie to you, or laying the groundwork for a TV show or a trilogy that's many, many years away and it's so hard to even wrap your mind around or care. This quick line was obvious and didn't interfere at all.
Next time, baby.
I wish more teases operated at that level. Happy doesn't have a lot to do in this movie, but I love the fact that Jon Favreau, the director, included himself as this minor character. It's all the more funny now that this character has appeared in 8 Marvel movies, most recently No Way Home, meaning his literal years in the MCU now extends further than Robert Downey Jr.'s. What a weird thought. I completely forgot that Phil Coulson is here right from the very beginning. He's fantastic immediately, and it's no wonder they carried him forward as a recurring character. I'm really curious if they had that in mind when first casting him or if he was supposed to be a one-off. But it actually makes the weight of his death in the Avengers all the more sad watching these movies in this back-to-back rewatch. And of course, Yinsen. All I can say is, that man's a hero. Maybe we should be thanking him for the MCU. While I'm still on the subject of characters, I want to look more closely at Tony and his character arc in the movie, including how Obadiah Stane folds in and plays off that. Tony is cocky and arrogant. I love how that plays into scenes like him pitching the Jericho missile. This is his biggest new potential contract, yet he shows up hungover and breezes his way through the thing, knowing ahead of time that the sale's pretty well guaranteed. He's so accustomed to success, and he knows he's the best at what he does. And it immediately kicks off a fundamental arc of the MCU that Tony prefers a preemptive, deterrent-style approach. His father apparently has a credit in creating the atomic bomb.
My father helped defeat the Nazis. He worked on the Manhattan Project. A lot of people, including your professors at Brown, will call that being a hero.
I can't believe how quickly they breeze past that massive bit of history rewriting. But yeah, obviously this guy would be raised with blinders to the realities of being an arms dealer. Trying to protect the world by creating bigger weapons is another character trait that leads him directly down the path of Ultron. This setup works within this movie, and I think Marvel at large carried it forward extremely well. I just really appreciate the depth they gave Tony and how well his logic and moral compass seem to carry across the franchise. Fighting fire with fire is what he's always known. Even while he's on this redemptive arc, he still has that in mind. As a side thought, considering we've gone down this path already with Tony, I have no clue what the Armor Wars series will be about. I can't tell yet if the fact that we've seemingly done this all once before completely zaps or builds my excitement for that upcoming series. We'll have to wait and see. Anyways, Tony is confronted by this in the most overt way possible. Who knew selling weapons could be a bad thing? Coming home from his captivity with this 180 perspective shift makes a lot of sense. His announcement is hasty, but this is a man who has never faced a real consequence in his life. His instant rejection of weapons gives us a reason to root for him and sets up this great moral mission where he tries to undo his own contributions to modern warfare. It's a fantastic theme throughout this movie that Tony is essentially fighting himself, whether that be his own weapons or the weapons he inspired. I'm a huge fan of the way it's driven home that only Tony could have been Iron Man. both through his genius and tech skills, but more importantly, through his reckless behavior. It's a major character flaw, but one that is fundamental to this character. 2 seconds ago, his tests shot him straight into the roof. A bit of slapstick that still cracks me up to this day. And now, he's already soaring this untested suit up as high as possible? The scene of him icing up is so important to show his attitude and risk-taking philosophy. And while he's busy playing with his new toys, Stain is watching this punk kid destroy his company. It's an excellent reason for him to turn on Tony. It feels very sudden until we learn he's always had a dirty streak dealing under the table. He was also the one who filed the injunction against Tony. So this brewing distrust is nothing new. It kind of shows Tony as being naive and raises Stain up as a proper villain. Tony never saw the issue with manufacturing and dealing weapons, so obviously he wasn't looking close enough at it to think his own company could be on the wrong side of things. Again, I'll say this is part of why I really like the casting of silly, likable Jeff Bridges. The movie establishes a very obvious terrorist threat, so they can flip that around on us halfway through. It's been too long for me to remember if that twist actually landed back in the day. I kinda think it would've. Try to remember a time like 50 superhero movies ago where good guy / business partner ends up being the main villain isn't a super common trope. I think this would have been a good twist at the time. But around the time this little twist is built up and presented is also where some of the glaring issues in the movie start to arise. They include this injunction reveal, the double dealing, and eventual meeting with the terrorist villain as 3 separate reveals. So by the time that meeting takes place, it's no longer a surprise, yet they kind of play it off as one. I guess it's a 1, 2, 3 of really driving home truly how evil this guy is. It unfolds like, ooh, he's a little shady, maybe not that trustworthy, oh okay, he's an outright supervillain. The full extent of that decline then feels like it just falls straight off a cliff face. He goes from being this underground dealer to suddenly openly making attempts on people's lives out in public. He leaves Tony for dead. He goes after Pepper, all culminating in him fighting Tony in this giant suit out in the streets. I like the juxtaposition of having the sleek, perfected Iron Man fighting this clunky knockoff. Maybe they should have used this the way that they used the Destroyer in Thor, where he's not the literal villain, he's just an obstacle. Like, why the hell does Stain use the suit so intuitively when it was just finished being built? That's fairly stupid. I can suspend a bit of disbelief. Really, Tony probably should have fought against Raza in the Ironmonger suit, then wrapping things up with more of a mental and moral victory over Stain. The real issue is Stain openly causing so much wanton destruction. I guess he's power hungry and feeling the bloodlust, but this dude is suddenly trying to chuck a car full of people at Tony? Where does that come from? He was the secretive, manipulative man. Now he's just a literal murder machine? Does he think if he publicly executes Tony and knocks down a couple buildings, people are going to be thrilled with this technology? There just isn't a plan anymore at this point, not even a shred of one. So while I think the fight is pretty short and relatively effective, purely from like an action standpoint, from a storytelling one, I don't understand this third act at all. It's a mess. I will say in those final moments, I think Tony deserves more credit than he gets for being willing to die to stop Stain in that final showdown. That's huge character growth. He's a pretty famously selfish man. But it annoys the hell out of me that this explosion somehow blows Tony to safety, ignores Pepper, but still managed to nuke Obi? What? I get it must be hard to write a giant action set piece. My standards aren't that high. Just make it like a shred believable. Really, the ending of that conflict absolutely should have come down to a combination of Tony's brains and willingness to push the limits. We've established those two things ad nauseum, and during this fight he's working with the disadvantage of his failing arc reactor prototype, which means he can't really go guns blazing. It's really satisfying when we watch him use the lesson he learned in his test flights. Having Stain die in the icing malfunction was a perfect conclusion to that fight. It's something Tony has overcome in a way only he would have ever been able to, and he turns it against the villain, showing again, only Tony can be Iron Man. But then for some reason the fight keeps going, and the end that we get after that is it's a big explosion, but it's worse. It's very much worse. Move a few pieces around, retain a little bit more consistency with character motivations, and I think this ending could have worked pretty easily. Just side note here, how cool is it that the 10 rings are here from the beginning? Even if it's retconned or explained in more depth later on, I just love it. So, while the third act has some issues, it certainly doesn't ruin the movie for me. There's too much else in this movie that just hits right on the money and kind of rocks my world. Give me a minute here, because I need to gush about a few things. Every single suit up and reveal in this movie is incredible. If there's one thing Jon Favreau does well, it's taking a beat for some epic posing and to show off some badassery. The first reveal of his Mark I armor coming from the cave, underscoring that whole box of scraps feel with its clunky inefficiencies, is still cool as all hell. All these years later, and the montage of him assembling and testing the Mark II suit is still among my favorite sequences in a superhero origin movie. This is like the most fun part of origin movies. We see Spider-Man practicing climbing walls and doing flips. We see Iron Man literally building his suit. I genuinely feel robbed every time an origin movie doesn't have something along those lines. Then there's the culmination of all his testing and tinkering, with it all slowly clicking into place as pure eye candy. And once again, we have a final suit-up sequence. I don't know how this movie made each one of these distinct and memorable and flashy without feeling gratuitous. In fact, it's actually more satisfying and rewarding each time, because we get to witness the small ways within this movie that his process is already improving. The CGI in this movie holds up incredibly well. I'm honestly not certain there was a single moment where I felt pulled out of the movie by it. There's not really much else to say there. Maybe it comes down to their commitment to using practical suit parts when and where they could, but they deserved that Academy Award nod. It feels a little ahead of its time. Everything about this movie is built to show us who Tony is and what it means to him to be Iron Man. Him painting the suit red and gold because he's a show-off? They don't need to make some tongue-in-cheek joke about how comic booky and over-the-top the design is. I'm so sick of superhero movies undercutting their own coolness like that. This suit is flashy specifically because he wanted it that way, and it's totally in character. These early movies still show off how capable the suit is, while still including and showing vulnerabilities. Each iteration in this movie takes major damage and wear and tear. Tony is shrugging off bullets, but the heavier weaponry is taking its toll, knocking him around, leaving holes in it, blasting pieces of the suit to bits. It's a really hard thing to show these superheroes take damage, and then still have them walk it off. The Iron Man suit is a great opportunity to show a superhero physically get beat to hell, and then he can go back to his shop and fix it up. You don't have to explain how he healed overnight, and I think that starts to get lost in some of the later appearances of this character, where he pretty much feels invulnerable. What goes hand in hand with us being absolutely sold on the design and function of this suit? The sound design. Something else they rightfully earned an Academy Award nomination for. Every little movement this suit makes has a buzz, whir, grind, and chunk. This suit is made out of hundreds of pounds of metal. Of course it's gonna clang and crash around. They even distinguish the suits well as they slowly improve. I understand in later movies the suit is eventually supposed to advance beyond any of this, but listen to the moment where Tony lands among this hostage situation. That heavy clunk as he slams to the ground can be felt in a way that deserves a big comic book sound bubble. While I'm on that scene, right from that moment through to him wrecking everyone and everything, getting shot out of the sky by a tank, and turning and walking away from that explosion, we have him stomp through the desert with the amazing sound design, the intense music, and splash page worthy visual moments. It's all so good. Look at those oh shit faces as he roasts everyone like a fire bat. It's bordering on some psycho behavior, but damn does it look amazing. Moments like this are more memorable than anything seen in so many other Marvel movies. Segueing, yet again, like Obi Stain, this whole soundtrack rules. Marvel rarely has made memorable themes and scores for their movies. I'm not sure why they didn't carry forward this unstoppable, heavy-driven theme, but it absolutely rules. Something else major I noticed is how funny this movie is. They hinge the humor so fully on Robert Downey Jr.'s shoulders, and he just flings out constant zingers with perfect deliveries. The jokes aren't non-stop, they don't interrupt what's happening or undermine a scene, it's not constant references and quips, it's all based on the characters and situations. That's something that is sort of devolved across 20-some movies, but it's so sharp and entertaining here. And I'm gonna round out this review by rattling off a few more things that didn't really fit elsewhere, really short looks at highly specific details, because I love just kind of brain dumping through these videos. This movie is really stylish. I genuinely really like the look of it. Things don't look like washed out concrete, and even the dark and dimly lit scenes still look clear and comprehensible. I actually like the way this movie makes use of darkness. We kind of have two borderline horror moments. In that grim cave with Tony waking up on a slab and ripping away his bandages, it's like this Frankenstein Twilight Zone moment. It's pretty unnerving. And we have this fun reveal slash kind of jump scare with the Ironmonger suit popping out of the dark with those swinging chains. It's hard to appreciate now as we've seen it so many times, but I'm pretty sure this movie was the first to do this hand-wavy hologram computer tech, at least in this style. We had movies like Minority Report that did similar things before, but it's basically a trope nowadays that every not too distant future sci-fi movie has a version of this technology. Honestly, it kind of feels like nobody has thought of anything cooler or more futuristic than that in over a decade. I'd love to hear examples of other movies that did versions of this first, or ones who have improved on it since. Maybe I'm wrong here, because I don't see people credit this movie with this very often, but it's pretty inseparably connected to Iron Man in my mind. It could just be me, but maybe Tony could have given Pepper like 2 seconds more instruction before asking her to plunge her hand in his chest. I do like that that scene was done with practical effects. But in the same vein, why the hell did Obadiah have a mini arc reactor retriever? What are either of those moments? Don't think I didn't notice. What is up with this high-pitched device that immobilizes people? I know they included it in this meeting, just so we know what it can do and what it is for when he uses it later on Tony, but that means he freezes this guy just so he can give him an evil speech and then shoots everyone anyways? It's just kind of silly, and I feel they could have found a more meaningful way to introduce this little device. Stan Lee cameoing as Hugh Hefner? Oh, it's just incredible. The wipe transitions feel so distinctly not on brand for Marvel at this point, but I'm glad Favreau kind of did his own thing and kept a bit of a director's touch in there. He does it again in Iron Man 2, and I think it appears like once in Iron Man 3, so it becomes this sort of within Iron Man specific thing. I don't think it's anywhere else in the MCU. I'll have to keep an eye out through this rewatch. It's funny how distinctly Star Wars that feels to me, and nowadays Favreau is busy with The Mandalorian, so I guess that series is really a good fit for him. The ending of this movie is so perfect. Not the third act less so, but the actual final moments. Having Tony confidently announce his identity goes against everything we typically think and know about superheroes. And of course, the cockiest guy out there is the one to break that mold. I appreciate that this movie has an animated ending credits. I honestly wish every movie played around with this, especially superhero movies. It's such a cool way to add a little more to the experience. This one is really just okay, but I still enjoy that it's there at all. I kind of forgot that these movies had post-credit scenes right from the beginning. I love it. There are so many staples of what makes an MCU movie nowadays, and I was surprised to be reminded that this has always been a part of the franchise. I don't like how nowadays people seem to talk about it like the post-credit is a bigger deal than the actual movie they just watched, but I don't want to rain on people's parade. It's fun to be excited about these things. Keep in mind, when they included this one, they had no guarantees. This stinger was basically them saying, oh man, we sure hope we get to make the Avengers. The balls there is like Babe Ruth calling his shot. Marvel Studios has nothing to their name. They're starting with Iron Man, and they're already promising that they're gonna make Marvel's Justice League, which is kind of how the Avengers existed in many people's minds at this time. Wrapping things up for Iron Man 1, I poured a lot of praise on this movie, and I genuinely think it deserves so much credit. It's a shame the third act is so rocky, and staying going totally insane feels so out of place, because it's nearly a perfect superhero origin movie up until that point. So 2/3 of the movie is incredible. It deserves points for all the heavy lifting it does in establishing the character, its own trilogy, and the larger franchise. It's still oozing with charm, is really stylish both visually and audibly, and Robert Downey Jr. is flawless from start to finish. This movie earns a rock-solid 7.5 from me. Great and bordering on excellent. It's wild that all these years later, this movie is still as good as it is. It remains a relatively top-tier Marvel movie for me. But this golden boy, golden red I suppose, wasn't as flawless as I remembered. Moving on to Iron Man 2 back in 2010. Remember, this one is still pre-Avengers. Iron Man was the only character to get a sequel before the big team-up. So, in a small way, this sort of becomes the Avengers 0.5, acting as a prequel, introducing characters and moving a few pieces in place while working to hype up that movie. As becomes quickly apparent, Marvel now knew what they had and were seemingly a little more careful with it, not allowing the free-form production of Iron Man 1, and instead became this looming presence that seems to have vastly interfered with the end product. This movie was in development before Disney acquired Marvel Studios, so I don't believe that played a part. It was instead Marvel themselves babying their new golden child. I hadn't seen this movie in ages. Looking at my pre-rewatch MCU ranking, I actually had this as my least favorite Marvel movie. But as I've steadily lost confidence in this ranking over the years, I'm so excited to rewatch Iron Man 2 and 3, specifically to see whether my opinion on either of them has changed. I'll open by saying, yeah, this movie still isn't very good. It has more to like than I remembered, but it's a very confused movie. I understand that they felt they had to do a lot of catch-up, jumping us ahead to a point where Tony has publicly been Iron Man for a while now. But having 3 opening scenes, Ivan creating his own reactor, Tony fighting the government, and kicking off the Stark Expo feel like a bit much to cram up top. The first movie started off with such a bang and kept that pace going, while this movie really can't decide how or where to start. Ivan's montage is funny to me in the sense that it feels like something that would be used in a non-MCU superhero movie of the early 2000s. It's not a bad thing. In fact, bolstered by this super distinct, almost Elfman-like industrial score with the chanting vocals, it's a pretty damn cool opening credit sequence. And Ivan's metamorphosis is one hell of a track. I think if they tightened up this whole opening, it'd be really effective. They should have cut down on some of these inclusions, especially Tony fighting the government. He comes across as a complete a-hole here. Tony's meant to be cocky and antagonistic, especially in this movie, but he comes across as this hyper-arrogant asshat that I can't imagine how anyone would ever root for them. Yet everyone in this room is yucking it up like he's being cute and charming, and he really isn't. He thinks he's single-handedly responsible for world peace in like 6 months' time? He can't be that naive, can he? Tony then basically tells the government to suck his iron rod and everyone claps and cheers for him. Then the government goes, "Oh, you," and they just completely drop it. It feels like a story out of Reddit's r/that happened. I get that the average person in this world is supposed to be a fan of Tony and Iron Man, but don't include this scene if you're simply going to drop the USA v Stark storyline after one relatively obnoxious scene. Really, I think in this day and age, I just don't want or need a reminder that billionaires are literally above the law. It's something I don't think people have ever really enjoyed, but it's aged very poorly now. I would instead interlace this courtroom scene throughout Ivan's opening credit montage. Have some of these plot points seen through newspapers and TV broadcasts, starting with Ivan seeing Tony announce himself as Iron Man, sparking Vanko to begin his own work. We then continually time jump, fast forwarding to see Tony announcing the return of the Stark Expo while Ivan continues to make progress. Maybe include little examples of him testing the gear, somewhat mirroring Tony's own trial and error montage from the first movie. A few more time skips, and Ivan's gear is nearly done and Tony is off fighting the government. Especially be sure to include the claim that there's no threat because only he knows how to make Iron Man suits. We can even transition out of this montage to real time to show the final moments of Tony on trial and establish the government will remain a nuisance and threat throughout. I'm on board with the idea that the government would want and feels they deserve some claim to the suit. Obviously, a private citizen shouldn't have sole control over this mega kill machine. But the dichotomy of it is, we know Tony has earned it, and obviously the government would want to bastardize that. So I'm into this real-world feeling plot progression where we can see both sides. Sowing his own country's distrust is pretty damn important for Ivan's plan to destroy the Stark legacy. The USA is waiting for an excuse to pounce on Tony. So yeah, there's a semblance of an idea here, but the only thing they did with it was have Tony show off how smart and sweet he is, except it doesn't come across well at all. And there were just 1,000 other ways they could have introduced Hammer and his failing tech. So, I don't know, I would probably throw the whole thing away. Generally, I like the ideas of seeing Tony shower himself in fanfare with the revived Stark Expo. And if handled better, I still like the idea of him sticking it to the man in court. But establishing those plot points didn't need to take up the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it results in a first act that really drags. So we're not off to a great start. Then we finally start to get into some of the meat of this movie. Specifically that the suit is killing Tony. There's something really amazing there, that the tech he created that both saved him physically and morally is now literally killing him. Tony thinks he's dying, so his recklessness that was so important to Iron Man 1 is actually carrying forward in a much more self-destructive way. It's not a flaw he ever overcame, and in fact, he basically learned that he can get away with anything. I think this is an excellent direction for this movie to take, but I might as well address this now as it's going to loom over the entire review regardless. Favreau desperately wanted to do Tony's Demon in a Bottle arc, where he succumbs to his alcoholism. Instead, we have one scene of him getting sloppy drunk and some other erratic self-destructive behavior that somehow never steers into the dark territory this story needed. We have Tony at this physical low, but it barely matters, and I just wanted to see it taken so much further. This movie establishes quite a few different stakes, but none of them are very well realized, and it means there's almost no tension at any point in this movie. Iron Man 2 attempts to run 3 separate major plots. Tony is dying and fighting against himself, his friends, and, kinda the government. The second is Ivan wanting his revenge, and third is Hammer wanting to be the new Stark. These crisscross a little, but not as much as you'd really expect, and even when the plot points directly come together, they never quite connect. I want to dissect each one on its own as much as I can. First, the Tony is dying plot. This leads to him acting completely irrationally, as it might for someone who thinks their days are numbered. Everyone close to Tony has taken notice and is trying the best they can to help. But really they just kind of seem to point out to him that he's being crazy, but take no actual steps to do anything to help this man. Tony promotes Pepper to CEO on a whim, and she somehow doesn't take that as a bad sign. As it plays out within a single scene, she sees that he can't be trusted to look after himself, but moments later is considered of sound mind to make that massive decision? Sure, okay. Then Tony enters the race at Monaco. I guess that's something a billionaire might do with his time. It's the sort of thrill-seeking I'd expect from someone who's about to die. But they don't give the scene or the implications there any weight. It's not presented as this risk-taking or battling with dark thoughts. Instead, he just does it. He's a weirdly good racer, I guess. We hardly even see him make the decision or address the fact that he's teetering on the edge. So it's left feeling incredibly pointless. Tony soars through the air in a human-sized tin can like every day. This could have shown he's turned into this adrenaline junkie, and he's using that to keep himself going in the face of death. The struggle there kind of writes itself, and they just skipped over the details that would have made it impactful. This scene is one of, I think, 2 times Tony and Ivan intersect. So I'll save most of that for my Ivan plot deconstruction, but since I'm off topic now anyways, I did have to laugh at Tony's racing suit simply because it looks like it came from one of Fox's Fantastic Four movies. Alright, so after this brush with death while he's already dying, Tony gets wasted drunk at his potential last birthday. Again, a plot point that sounds rather dark, but it's just this silly scene of everyone kind of goofing off. Rhodey approaching Tony here about his behavior feels like a superior scolding an employee rather than appealing to a close friend in need. And then his solution is to somehow diffuse a drunk Iron Man by putting on a suit and fighting him? Don't get me wrong, it's a fun fight, even if the excuse is weak. And mashing up Another One Bites the Dust with Robot Rock is so good.
Goldstein.
Yes, Mr. Stark.
Give me a fat beat to beat my buddy's ass.
But they actually just destroy everything. because obviously they would. This was a horrible plan. All Tony's guests somehow stuck around even when he was shooting blasts around and blowing up plates out of the air, even though he's too drunk to stand. And they even stayed through most of this fight as well. Looking back, nobody even left when Tony fought Ivan either. What is it with spectators in this movie who just love to be in harm's way? This drunk Iron Man mini crisis feels like perhaps the only remaining shred of the struggles with alcohol Favreau wanted to center the movie on. But it was obviously so watered down, with him being drunk being the reason they fight, and then there's like literally never any mention of any of that ever again. It's always bothered me that Tony doesn't do a remote shutdown of this second suit as Rhodey flies away, especially when he knows the military's trying to get their hands on it. Guess who your buddy works for, guy? Maybe he's too drunk to do so, but he always could have done it later. And what is Rhodey's plan? Eventually this thing will need a battery, and it's been pretty well established his arc reactor is incredibly difficult to reverse engineer. In fact, that piece of info was crucial to the opening of this movie when Tony dunked on other people's attempts to create Iron Man suits. They never address this in future movies either. Is Tony just supplying a continuous stream of batteries for this other suit that he doesn't control? I put my blinders onto that one, but it always nags at the back of my mind. I really dislike how quickly and easily Nick and Natasha help Tony. I know it's not a cure, but it's a little too quick and convenient. And it doesn't actually achieve anything that important other than making his little necklines disappear. So it's kind of useless anyways, he's still dying. The whole thing is just a lose-lose inclusion for me. It's both too easy and too pointless. Lots of little things in this movie start to add up, but none of them fully derail things. For example, Coulson is put in charge of watching over Tony. He has one funny line about tasing Tony.
If you attempt to leave or play any games, I will tase you and watch Super Nanny while you drool into the carpet. Okay?
I think I got it, yeah.
Then fails to stop Tony from leaving and is reassigned. To the point that he didn't even know Tony had left. That was like his one job. He is only in this movie because people liked the character and they had probably decided to bring him back for the Avengers. I like him too, but he serves no purpose here. I think he's only in these 2 scenes, and one of those scenes is to address that he is leaving. It's just a quick hello, goodbye to remind us he exists. Fury then hands over the briefcase from Tony's father with a super important message, but not so important that it can't be given to him straight, or in a timely manner. Nope, they waited until many years later and handed it to him with a riddle. I'm flabbergasted at how stupid this is. Then there's the message Howard Stark would have recorded for Tony when he was like 6 years old. He's putting a hell of a lot of faith in this kid. Even if he were excelling at his age, why would Howard assume Tony would be the only one who could solve this? The idea that Howard was limited by the technology of his time is really interesting, but maybe they should have separated Howard's touching message to Tony and what is yet another riddle to a critically important discovery. And I should specify, important to the entirety of the world. The fact it is important to saving Tony's life is random coincidental bullshit. Nick dangles this in front of Tony, teasing that it will somehow solve the problem with the palladium. If Nick knew that's what the solution to this riddle would bring, why doesn't he just tell Tony that? It drives me nuts. Luckily, Tony figures it out despite everyone obfuscating this for no discernible reason. Jarvis tells Tony creating a new element cannot be done, but Tony does it anyway. I get that this is meant to be more of Tony being reckless and reaching beyond what anybody else expected or whatever, but it really sucks the tension out of it when you include a line like that and then it's proven moot, like 4 seconds later. Why not have Nick be honest about what he's handing him? The blueprints for a new element. And instead hide it behind the fact that it's never been achieved in a stable state. Then the mystery Tony is solving is creating a stable element, not navigating this vague nothing his dad left him with. Why did Nick never give it to him sooner? It can be because Tony's never paid the Arc technology any attention until very recently. We then have a scene of Tony and Pepper for like the first time in an hour, and she's very understandably struggling in her new position because it was handed over with no thought, and seemingly very little was done to assist her in that transition. And then after only about one scene showing how tough it's been for her and no real payoff, she quits. Let's just ignore Tony's whole speech from earlier that it's always been you. That was apparently untrue. Now, the whole Tony is dying and acting unpredictable plot is resolved, after they failed to do anything with it. Tony's a little sad, Rhodey and Pepper are upset with him, he fixes it on his own, and everyone is cool again. Nothing changed, other than Rhodey gained some armor, which directly opposes Tony's motivation in that opening scene of keeping the armor from the government. So much of this story thread is spinning in place, serving as filler, and changes nothing. It felt like a compromise for the intended alcoholic story. And with that in mind, it explains why the entire second act of this movie is random BS, because it awkwardly took the place of an actual meaningful plot. Maybe the second major plot point will fare better. Ivan is lifted up as the primary antagonist of this movie, so I'd like to walk through his story next. Ivan's father, Anton Vanko, worked with Howard Stark back in the day on the original arc reactor. Anton sold these plans on the black market and was fired and deported for it. Where is the nuance here, or moral dilemma? That isn't a revenge plot. It's a black and white villain who got caught, and now his villain son created a vendetta because he's upset. This movie doesn't remotely try to have us understand or sympathize with Ivan, and it sucks the life out of this character. Having that parallel and connection to Tony, being another prodigal son but raised without a silver spoon, is an interesting character, but they actively killed that intrigue by making Anton an overt bad guy, while also taking steps to redeem Howard Stark as a good guy. Last movie, he was known as the unloving father and billionaire arms dealer with shady business partners who apparently contributed to the atomic bomb. Not big picture-wise, but at least in regards to this storyline, Howard probably should have come off as the villain and Anton as the hero. At the very least, they should blur those lines. Then we'd understand Ivan and we'd have a proper revenge story. Maybe at the end, somewhat redeeming Howard, so he's not permanently thought of as a villain. Nah, let's nullify any stakes there whatsoever. I like that they tried to flesh out Howard's relationship with Tony. That's a tough thing to do when one character has passed away. But suddenly, he's this altruist whose main mission in life was to save the world and solve the energy crisis, all while hypocritically grooming his son to take over his weapons manufacturing empire. They never really addressed the two sides of that coin in a meaningful way. Instead, Howard good, Anton bad. Tony good, Ivan bad. That's all they give us. Getting back to Monaco, I like it as a unique setting for a showdown. That's one note in the pros column. I don't know how the hell Ivan had the confidence that he could strut down that track with cars going 250 kilometers an hour towards him, but I will say his tracksuit burning away in slow-mo all looks super cool. I can look past the absurdity because it gave me the same satisfaction as those awesome moments in the first movie where they favored the stylish and memorable shot over anything realistic. And really, Happy driving backwards on the track is almost more suicidal, but again, I'll look past it because he had to deliver the suitcase armor, and that resulting suit-up scene is so dope. It's just a great concept. Maybe Ivan should have whipped Tony during that 30-second window, but the sequence is more for us anyways. Ivan's plan seems quite terrible, but I am obsessed with the way he's dragged off like a maniac, shouting, boots falling off, the whole thing. It's delightfully unhinged. And when we learn that it was over the top to instead show Tony as vulnerable, I kind of buy a bit more into it. I mean, he had the upper hand. Killing Tony would certainly do more for the cause of showing vulnerability, but I'm in favor of villains who have a more nuanced objective. Ivan is trying to destroy Tony's legacy the way his father's was. So while I like that angle, Ivan's father's legacy probably deserved to be destroyed, but at least attempting more than straight up murder makes the Ivan plot work on at least one level. His capture is short-lived, and I actually kind of like the escape sequence, and Hammer teaming up with Ivan makes sense within this movie. Hammer's tech pales compared to Tony's, and he recognizes Ivan's skill. I have more thoughts on this, but for now, I buy the idea that they would join up with a mutual hate of Tony, even if for very different reasons. Temporary villain allegiances are usually a lot of fun, but once they have Ivan in this half-hostage, half-partnership situation, it really does remove him from the plot. Tony doesn't even know he's alive until there's like 15 minutes left in the movie, and Hammer obviously doesn't really watch over him all that well, as he openly starts working on more powerful whips and his own Iron Man armor? When, where, and how did he do those things? Ivan takes control of Hammer's drones to attack Tony. I'm fine with that. In fact, I like that it shows him having his own unique skills, while again making Hammer into a joke, and we have that villain-on-villain betrayal that we all expect. We just don't know when or how. That still has the potential to be a great long-term way to take Hammer from this schmuck who's trying to impress everyone through to an actual villain. It's just a shame they haven't actually done anything with that yet. Maybe it's still coming. I generally found it too jarring when Ivan shows up in yet another Iron Man suit knockoff for only like 30 seconds. And while I enjoy the payoff of Rhodey and Tony taking out Ivan by attacking each other, same as that party, why the hell did Ivan just stand there with his helmet down? What a stupid anticlimactic way to go. What is with these big Iron Men who just show off their faces and take a big blast to the face? Ivan's supposed to be this super genius on Tony's level, yet his plans involve walking shirtless onto a racetrack and ineffectively using his armor in a final battle before blowing everything up against a dude who can just fly away. Through this, we learned Tony is still the best Iron Man, Howard Stark is abysmal at choosing business partners, and that's about it. I don't think there's any actual lesson learned or character growth accomplished here. They had the starting point of a great character and possible conflict, and it all falls apart. Our last remaining plot thread is the rivalry of wannabe Stark, Justin Hammer. We see him stepping up to create suits for the government since Tony refuses to do so. That failure reel with the dude spinning around 180 degrees is seared into my brain. Hammer has a few brief run-ins with Tony across the movie before re-entering the story teaming up with Vanko. He's been humiliated professionally and personally by Tony. It makes sense that he's become quite desperate. Ivan makes drones when he asked for suits, and lucky for him, Rhodey delivers Hammer and the government a suit, allowing him to create his own take on things with the War Machine suit. His motivations here are that he simply wants to show he's a big shot and hopefully embarrass Tony. I love that as a lower stakes plot driver. Ivan turns it all against Hammer, continuing forward with his mission to destroy Stark's legacy. And really, looking back at this movie, I almost don't understand how he didn't succeed. After this wanton destruction from the drones that likely killed hundreds of people and caused absurd property damage, the public should no longer want private or militaristic suits. Ivan dies, but this is the exact thing he was trying to do. Maybe people are just convinced robots are bad and humans are good, but even War Machine got hijacked and started attacking. So this world has now seen 4 of these suits, Iron Man, Ironmonger, War Machine, and Ivan's thingy, and 3 out of 4 of them have tried to kill innocent people. How is this not an outright victory for Vanko? People are just that charmed by Stark? This would have led into Avengers in such a cool way, if the world kinda suddenly hated Iron Man and he had to overcome that for this larger threat. Vanko is just misused at every possible corner. While we're still talking about Hammer and his suits and drones, that scene of Tony and Rhodey just mowing down drones while they pull cool poses for 2 minutes is probably the best scene in the entire movie. It's just some cool comic booky action hero jazz that I love to see sprinkled in these movies. But it did result in the drones never being intimidating for a single second. They just never really managed to communicate them as an actual threat at any point. If they addressed that they were meant to be throwaways simply to make Tony look bad, that would be so interesting. Instead, the good guys win, Hammer is arrested, and all of this is now wrapped up as well. Again, Tony learns what? He's great, drones are bad, and Justin Hammer is a nerd. Yep, another potentially interesting storyline that has the ball totally dropped. This movie spends too long being set up in the first act, then largely runs in place for the second act, resolving a story I was never that into, and then the third act is actually almost okay, right up until several plot points get in each other's way and it all wraps up super quickly and neatly without any real payoff. Tony dying was already resolved by then, and neither the Hammer or Vanko stuff has enough room to breathe. Perhaps surprisingly, I don't hate this movie, but I definitely don't like it. Somehow, despite utterly broken and pointless storylines, there is still some enjoyment to be had. I enjoy that we're seeing Tony at the height of his narcissism in this movie.
Textbook narcissism. Agreed?
He still largely feels infallible, built up even more by Ivan and Justin failing to be Stark-like figures. But that conflict feels super detached when Tony has essentially zero screen time with either villain. It all would have just worked better if the actual villain was his own alcoholism, and have Tony be so numb to the world that he doesn't see these chickens coming home to roost. I see a lot of people suggest that this movie suffers because it spends too much time laying Avengers groundwork. And while that didn't help, it didn't really get in the way since the rest of the movie was directionless anyway. I strongly dislike Nick Fury's presentation of the MacGuffin, but I cannot deny that Samuel L. Jackson owns this role from his very first moment on screen. Adding these new characters, forcing in S.H.I.E.L.D. and Coulson, and even gags like Cap's shield don't interfere, but they also contribute nothing. It probably works better now than it did back when it was new, with the benefits of hindsight, knowing these setups pay off. But it's a whole bunch of hollow nothingness smushed into an already busy movie. Pretty well, all the best scenes in this movie feature Hammer on screen. Like this one, where he monologues and goofs around talking about weapons for 3 minutes, and it's somehow a highlight of this movie. How is Rockwell so damn good? He's not meant to be likable like Tony. Rockwell is just so magnetic that even when he's playing this complete tool, you can't look away. This is best exemplified when he shimmies and dances on stage. It's amazing to see this charismatic actor play someone who is trying so desperately hard. Like, Rockwell would have to tone down his own natural cool and replace it with this attempt. It's a shame we didn't see him interact with Tony more, because the way his shtick foils Tony's natural suave and cool demeanor is brilliant. And I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that every one of his line deliveries in this movie is perfect.
I don't know if you know this, but I don't speak Russian!
While the character of Ivan Vanko has major issues, watching this back, I actually appreciate what Mickey Rourke did with the role. This is something I don't have an ear for, but I've seen people say his Russian accent is spot on. It's really well documented how much work he put into fleshing out the character, and the edit cut him down to the bored guy.
I want my board.
It's a shame he did all that work only for Vanko to become a meme of a character. Unfortunately, we have to judge on what's available, and through that, he's a lame villain. It does make me wonder why the hell they had this character who is famously a Russian defector and somehow didn't justify her inclusion in this story through that. Would Natasha not have some specific intel or insight that would make her well equipped to handle Ivan? And if they wanted this to set up the Avengers with Black Widow on the team but not War Machine, why the hell wasn't she a co-lead of this movie? While Johansson looks like $1 million in this movie with one of my favorite MCU Widow designs, she is honestly pretty stiff in the role. I'm gonna get some flack for saying that, but I don't believe it's her fault. Scarlett Johansson had already made Lost in Translation, Ghost World, and several other standouts. She wasn't some new girl on the block. She was already a pretty well-established actress. The screenwriters or higher-ups just chose to waste her talents and focus 100% on her sex appeal. Yes, that's a crucial part of how her character disarms others, but it's such a damn shame that Scarlett could have brought her own unique swagger, and they gave her a half-baked, flat, borderline nothing of a character to work with. There's one last character to discuss, and that's James Rhodes, and the recasting of Terrence Howard with Don Cheadle. While I can look back at where the character is now 10 years later and be totally on board with Don Cheadle, it does not work for me in this movie. I will say I love the hell out of his reintroduction.
Didn't expect to see you here.
Look, it's me. I'm here to deal with it. Let's move on.
That's such a funny way to breeze past this fairly major recasting. But there are some truly horrible lines and deliveries where he sticks out like a sore thumb. That carries through most of the movie. I imagine it would be tough for any actor to emote properly while the camera is pushed in on their face against a green screen for these in-helmet shots, but he didn't gel very well with most of the movie. It isn't until the big gun banter in the final showdown that it feels like he makes the role his own, and I start to finally believe he and Tony's friendship and history. There's even one more scene after at the end when they're all on the rooftop that also works for me. It's very noticeable that Cheadle is finding his footing throughout this movie, and with the overall joke and humor stylings of the MCU changing pretty dramatically around the time of the first Avengers movie, I don't think Terrence Howard would have fit that new vibe at all. So while it's iffy in Iron Man 2, it's likely the last time I'll ever bother comparing Howard and Cheadle, because we ended up with the better actor for the role long term. Really, the character has almost never been well handled, and I wish they had simply made room for more Natasha. Broadly, I felt the humor doesn't flow as naturally in this sequel. Everything feels a little more forced, and we lose that quality banter of this lovable asshole, which now often tips into the offbeat remarks of a straight-up asshole. Tony's line directed at Natasha.
I want one.
No.
It's creepy and not really funny. Hammer cracked me up consistently, but Tony should really be the show stealer here, even if he is off his game. We still have glimpses of it, like the diner scene.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Do I look at the patch or the eye? Yeah.
We've secured the perimeter, but I don't think we should hold it for too much longer.
Huh. You're fired.
Those were some of the first and best laughs I got from Tony in this movie. So I guess my main complaint there is a lack of consistency. I'll do another quick list of things before wrapping up my thoughts on this sequel. I love the tradition of having Stan Lee cameo as real people. Having him on screen for 2 seconds as Larry King is great.
Oh, you know what? Don't be like fucking Larry King. That motherfucker.
Happy is somehow a fantastic character. How often does that happen when a director casts themselves like this and it works well? You've got to love that John included a scene where he gets his ass absolutely beat and is literally flipped on his head by Black Widow. And his big moment in this movie is a hilarious one-on-one fist fight while Natasha takes out like 12 guards on her own. Yes, her choreo includes a lot of quick cuts around the stunt work, but I thought it was an impressive introduction to her skills. I wasn't sure how that would age, but it's both badass on her side and goofy on Happy's. It's a win-win for me. I enjoy the FU finale of making the senator present this award to Tony. All my issues with that plot thread aside, this is still a funny payoff for that. At least this movie still has lots of clanging and clunking with the suit, with them still frequently using practical armor components in scenes, and it's pleasantly noticeable how good that looks and feels. Tony hanging out in that donut, iconic. And the post-credit scene is such a good tease. Ending off with the big thunderclap is super cool, and it's a great hype-building moment. I don't think many people cared very much about a Thor movie, and so doing a bit of work to get people excited for that is always fun to see. Wrapping things up, this plot is an utter mess with mixed performances and a lot of things seemingly lost in the edit. This movie needed heavy revisions, and I can see 2 potentially better movies hidden in this heap. One would be Tony chasing away his friends and family through his demons, sending everyone directly into Justin Hammer's arms. This would include Rhodey alongside one of the prototype suits. Rockwell is perfect, and watching him pick up the scraps of Tony's life would have been a very cool dynamic. Hammer could be very antagonistic and a bit of a puppet master, filling Tony's void, but really it would be about Tony fighting himself. And since we kind of need a big action scene still, the climax could be Rhodey and Tony's relationship on a fragile line, with them fighting one another as they wrestle with this mini civil war of pro-government versus pro-freedom. How insane would those stakes be? And it would be a real excuse to see these two actually fight, while also literally stacking up Tony's tech against Justin's. The second potential story could have been Tony dealing with his imminent death, with Vanko threatening to destroy his family's legacy. So Tony has both a a literal and metaphysical death looming over him, all while Tony's own government is looking for an excuse to take it all away. We could include War Machine as a good guy working for the government and trying to take on Vanko himself without Tony, as a way of showing that nobody but Tony Stark can do what he does. Tony would instead team up with Natasha to bring down Vanko, and maybe even through him learn how to cure his palladium poisoning. Have it be that Anton Vanko mapped out a world-changing element and Howard blocked it because he felt the production would be too dangerous. Then we would be able to see and relate to both their perspectives and create a more meaningful revenge arc for Ivan. I would opt for the hammer and alcoholism story, mostly because I want to see much more of that character. Iron Man 1 had anti-Iron Man as the villain. This movie would primarily have anti-Tony as the villain. Iron Man 2 has one cool idea for every frustrating or wasted one, but very little changes or advances anything forward. It's not a strong sequel to Iron Man 1, and it's kind of a poor setup for Avengers. The characters, conflicts, themes, tone, and everything else never really come together. It's less than the sum of its parts. This movie gets a pretty weak 4.5 out of 10. That almost feels generous, really, but the movie is kind of enjoyable. You just can't look too closely at any of it, which I very much just did. And therefore, it remains in the lower tier of Marvel, right where I remember it being. And finally, on to Iron Man 3, releasing back in 2013, coming 1 year after the first Avengers. This is the movie I'm most interested to rewatch out of any of them, not just the Iron Man. I think this is what I've been most interested in out of the full MCU, as I'm least confident in my ranking of it. I've only seen it twice, and I've recently had people whose opinions I trust tell me it's good. And in the time since last seeing it, I've come to know Shane Black and his style a bit better. I suspect I disliked all the stuff with Harley. Even thinking of it now, I can't imagine liking a child shoved into this plot, but I'll go in with an open mind. I would have seen this once in theaters and again with my old roommate Nathan. And when Killian first showed up, hunched over, grinning and jumping around, Nathan shouted, "Who's this gremlin?" before laughing for like 5 minutes. For the record, Nathan has the most incredibly contagious laughter, and that moment came flooding back to me rewatching this. So while it's absolutely no fault of the movie, I'll literally never be able to unhear or unsee that association. Instantly, we are getting some signature Shane Blackness in this movie, specifically with the narration. It's a bit of a jarring difference when watching these 3 movies just a few days apart. And it's a Christmas movie, kinda, which is another Shane Black signature for whatever reason, but I quickly settled into this new presentation. Although the narration isn't very consistent, it's missing for like 3/4 of the movie and comes back at the very end. What really sold it is that even 10 years earlier in this world, in addition to Happy having an incredible haircut, we have Tony writing "You Know Who I Am" on his name tag, then capping off the narrated flashback with that line.
I'm different now. Well, you know who I am. We can see how cocky Tony was even before he was Iron Man. I'm only a few minutes into this movie, and I suspect I have severely misjudged it over the years. Let's continue talking about Tony right away here. Not just because he's the protagonist, dadoy, but because this movie does bold and interesting things with the character. A fun bit of behind-the-scenes trivia, showing some predestined full-circle-ness intrigue for everyone. Robert Downey Jr. was cast after Favreau saw Shane Black's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and Downey himself recommended Black to direct this movie after Favreau passed. It's a director he knew he was comfortable working with, and it's so immediately apparent how Downey and Black feed off each other and leave room to build on the character we know. I really liked the small details, like actually seeing his reactor shine through his shirts throughout. It's been very inconsistently present in the other movies, but much more importantly, this is the best, most complete character arc we've ever gotten for Tony. It's a superhero movie that cares more about dealing with the trauma of New York and having our protagonist wrestle with PTSD rather than some big CGI spectacle. That is an incredible thing to behold, especially within the MCU. Back when this was new and only movie number 7, I thought to myself, what? Are we done with action already? Put on the suit and go kick some ass. Now with 20 odd movies, a heap of TV shows, and like 6 more appearances from Tony Stark, all showing us plenty of movies where heroes suit up and punch bad guys, Iron Man 3 is now this amazingly welcome treat, switching things up, giving us a more low-key movie, and acting as this Avengers epilogue, dealing with the events of that movie on a personal level. Tony fought some aliens from the sky and rightfully should have died. Spending some time unpacking that is so fascinating. His very first panic attack when the kid whispers in his ear, "Yeah, I'd wig out too. It's real creepy, kid." I love the way that sequence is shot. It makes us uncomfortable right alongside Tony. This dude has placed the weight of the world on his shoulders, and it's led directly to an anxiety disorder. It's no wonder he hasn't slept for 72 hours and is throwing himself fully into this work. Now I want more superhero movies to focus on the difficulty of being a hero, and that lifestyle can and will break most people. However, I think the Mark 42 looks butt ugly, and think he should have stayed up another 100 hours figuring that one out. I like the shape of it, I've just never really liked the colors. For real though, the suit that can fly and assemble itself is a cool next step. Yet again, we're seeing another way Tony has leveled up his tech and is advancing with believable rapidity. The way he makes use of that new tech throughout the movie, summoning it to himself, assembling it on Pepper to protect her, piloting it remotely, it's all cool new stuff that stops the whole man in suit thing from feeling samey this fourth time around. Plus, I had to laugh at the idea that Tony parks this thing outside like a motorbike. There are loads of small moments like that in this movie. Since the events of the Avengers, Tony has largely cut out Happy and Pepper, focusing on his tinkering. He now personifies his suits, referring to them as if they were living people. The dependency there is actually quite sad. Tony's so far gone that he attempts to use his suits as a surrogate boyfriend, while he's off busy being this absentee partner. So while it's showing us the state Tony is in, that scene also sets up that he can pilot these remotely. Mr. Suave and Cool here is having nightmares that are infiltrating his life, like summoning the suit to his bedroom. What an awesome brief moment of horror. Tony is wigging out in this movie. He openly threatens the Mandarin and gives out his address. He's having panic attacks, and he calls this kid a pussy.
I guess he won, because that was 6 years ago.
Which happens, dads leave. No need to be a pussy about it. Here's what I need.
Really, he's a major dickhead to this kid through most of the movie. That abrasiveness is kind of an integral part of the character. And while I don't like seeing him being mean, it's nice that this movie actually includes that. And they eventually bring around some touching moments of these two relating, with Tony apologizing for being so hard on him. Then they turn that right back around again with Harley guilt-tripping Tony through their whole "we're connected" exchange. The movie doesn't actually spend a lot of time with them together, but we still see that they do understand one another. This kid actually becomes a rock for Tony while he's on his own, with his innocent, simple suggestions actually registering for Tony, breaking through his busy mind. That's a nice touch, and a legitimate good reason to include this character. Dealing with this trauma is one of the most interesting things Marvel ever did with Tony Stark, and it carries through this movie extremely well. The events of Iron Man 3 lead to him destroying his suits and properly appreciating Pepper. In an almost poetic moment with Tony staring at his own burning helmet, you can feel it all click for him, that he has put the suits ahead of himself and everyone else. Iron Man 1 and 2 taught Tony he was an invincible rock star. The Avengers shows him how much larger the real threats are and teaches him teamwork. Iron Man 3 completely isolates him, humbles him, and we come out the other side with a more mature and less careless Tony. He even symbolically leaves that guy behind by literally allowing someone to finally help him out and remove the shrapnel from his chest. Strictly as a Tony Stark movie, this is the best there is. As an Iron Man movie, I can understand why some people might feel robbed. There is very little full-on Iron Manning happening in this movie. I'm sure I weighed that against the movie years ago. Now though, I fully appreciate what it's doing here. showing what Tony is still capable of even when he doesn't have his precious suit. And it's all kind of a tease for this eventual third act that is by far the best of any Iron Man movie, which makes up for the rest, giving us a wealth of awesome Iron Man moments. The movie even ends with I am Iron Man once again, but completely recontextualized and with an all-new significance.
The truth is, I am Iron Man. One thing you can't take away, I am Iron Man.
Is it happening? Am I an Iron Man 3 fan? Is this movie better than Iron Man 1? I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I loved so much of what they did with Tony here. I think I need to take a breath and look at the larger movie before I jump to conclusions. Besides the Tony-specific stuff, what else does this movie have going on? We have the terrorist threat with the Mandarin causing explosions all over the country, leading to plenty of fear and chaos. Look how spooky these post-blast shadows are. It's a freaky bit of intrigue going on there. But spoiler, this guy isn't actually the Mandarin. I know, plenty of people disliked that twist, even before Shang-Chi expanded on it and gave people the villain they actually wanted. In fact, I imagine people are more forgiving of this twist now that we have that. But I never had an issue with it. I think it's unexpected, funny, and interesting. You would just never expect them to attach a household name and heavy hitter like Ben Kingsley to a major villain role, only for him to be this complete boob, slamming beers and acting like a pampered doofus. That's an outstanding twist. I love the way he played that intense, intimidating, and mysterious figure. Like, Kingsley was going all out with it, and it makes the eventual reveal all the better. The character and the presentation of the Mandarin are all so over the top and dialed up to 11, not because he's this super eccentric weirdo villain, but because it's an actual actor, this in-universe stage performer overacting the hell out of it. The real issue is that everything driving that plot kinda gets muddied. I think it works on a surface level, it just doesn't contain a lot of depth. This quote, Mandarin, doesn't actually seem to want or demand anything except to sow fear. I guess that's what terrorists do, but this fake plot was created as a cover-up for Killian's experiments, and before that eventual reveal, there isn't a real motivation presented to us. As a viewer, it's a little vague and doesn't give us very much to latch onto. But there are still cool moments in there, like the Mandarin staging this scenario where the president feels cornered and has to call him, only to execute the hostage anyways. That's a serious power move and like Joker level mind games. It's kind of funny, but mostly dark and sad when we learn that Trevor didn't think any of it was actually real. Now, I want to go deeper into the villains and the conflict, but I also needed somewhere to quickly talk about Rhodey, so I don't have a good segue here, nowhere near as good as Jeff Bridges, but this is where I'm squeezing it in. Cheadle fits much better in this movie, and they do more to show he's an actual friend to Tony. Even just with their small meeting at the bar, he's actually making time for Tony, trying to be there for him, asking questions, being supportive in a much more real way than anything in Iron Man 2. I think the government turning War Machine into Iron Patriot as a PR move feels very real. I totally buy into that. Although it's still odd to me that Tony has relinquished all safety precautions and control over this suit, or if not Tony, whoever's in charge of it nowadays, allowing a rando extremist goon to take it over? I'll look past it, even if it does still bother me. So, even with Tony mostly being on his own, this movie likely makes the best use of James Rhodes so far. It's nice to see Don Cheadle finding his own unique voice within this character. We have Aldrich Killian working with Maya Hansen on their Extremis project, which was designed to help humans regenerate limbs and heal from other damage. It's not working as intended, causing people to overheat and explode. I remember thinking this, along with the insane fire breathing and heat abilities, were a little too wacky and didn't fit the MCU. That was another note in the con column against this movie. Nowadays, we have had aliens, wizards, and 1,000 other things well beyond this level of comic book nonsense, and really I probably didn't want to see a third movie with Iron Man fighting another Iron Man knockoff, like Killian says.
Anyway, the point is, ever since that big dude with a hammer fell out of the sky,
Subtlety's kind of had its day.
So, it didn't bother me this time around. Killian created the Mandarin to cover up these explosions so nobody would look into his illegal activities and failed experiments. But at some point, that takes a leap to him manipulating the vice president and attempting to gain political control. That leap in motivations is introduced late in the movie and almost feels like he went that route just because he could. Next thing, he's snapping necks, torturing people, and attempting to slice them in half. We just never really see him as a full three-dimensional character, and he's yet another boring villain, even though that's mildly compensated by the interesting Mandarin twist. And what is Maya's role in all of this? Apparently she was meant to be the proper villain, and the higher-ups at the time, who famously blocked any female leads in any project, pushed her character aside. They then entirely added Killian into the script. So that's largely why neither of these characters feel fleshed out, and their story's kind of the sloppier part of this movie. They didn't fully cut Maya from the movie, but her motivations and allegiance are almost never clear. She goes to Stark's home to warn him about these larger plots, but we eventually learn she is actually working with Killian? So why go to Tony's house immediately before your people bombed it? Even if she was going against Killian's back, surely she would have known this was coming? Maybe she's just employing different methods? Maybe I'm supposed to buy that she was somehow unaware of how personally insane Killian had become, but it's hard to believe she didn't know the man orchestrating a terrorist cover-up was capable of any of that. Then later in the movie, she threatens to kill herself to save Tony after he gives her one little speech. I see people ragging on this whole plot for making no sense. Her presence in the story makes sense, but it's so poorly handled, and her allegiance can't really be pinned down for more than half a scene. By the time she's gone all double, triple, and quadruple agent, I really just didn't care anymore when she died. It was just never a very good, well thought out character, and she's killed off quite suddenly, having contributed nothing. Really, even though I like the Mandarin twist, a lot of the Killian plot feels pretty shallow. He felt wronged by Tony back in '99, and now he's trying to kill the president and take over the country? It's a big leap, and I was just never that interested in it. That all rightfully plays a backseat to Tony dealing with his issues, so it makes it easier to ignore how disinteresting it can be. I would be very interested to see what the original version of this movie, without Killian and Maya as the villain, would have looked like. Considering this movie clearly cares more about the character work and the actual villain plot is kinda disinteresting, there is some rock-solid action. Tony spends a full third of this movie without his suits, and still has some of his coolest ever scenes. Again, this movie is showing us what he is capable of without the suit. That's made all the better considering in the Avengers, Cap calls Tony out for being nothing more than his suits. Here, we see he's a hero without any of that. Our first major action set piece is the home bombing. Maybe Tony should have bunkerized his place or put his suits on monitoring and guard duty after this personal challenge to the Mandarin, at the very least to protect Pepper. I know he's stressed and tired, but he's never been that stupid. So the kickoff of this scene kind of bothers me, but the action here has some incredible moments. As a running theme through the whole movie, he's working with one hand tied behind his back, with a suit that isn't ready for proper flight or fighting. Tony flinging his armor between himself and Pepper, taking out helicopters, hanging on for dear life as the building collapses around him. It's all pretty damn exciting. I was so bummed when his little robo-arm buddy fell into the water, and it actually made me happier than I ever expected when he fishes that back out of the water in the end. Stealth dropping Pepper a message of him being safe through his suits was a cool touch. It's an important bit of growth for Tony as well. He stays hidden to protect Pepper, but knows he can't let her go on thinking he's dead for all this time. I don't know if Iron Man 1 Tony would have considered that. Some of my favorite parts of this movie are when Tony starts to MacGyver his way through these situations as he's being chased down by the extremist soldiers. We have him building contraptions, blowing things up, creating Christmas ornament bombs, one of the best things in this movie, and many other random implements used as weapons. This is an excellent substitution for the usual Iron Man fare. He gets a full water tower dropped on him. That'd be nothing to Iron Man, but it's a scary-ass hardcore thing to run from as a regular dude. It adds a lot of tension. Even when he does sort of get his armor back, he's again fighting disadvantaged with fractions of his suit, clumsily floating around and sorta kinda able to fight back. Iron Man is no fun against goons because he'll just turn on his auto-targeting kill mode. This is way more fun, unique, and exciting. Throughout all of this, they sprinkle in a great mix of comedic beats, quips, and very Shane Black jokes.
Cheap trick and a cheesy one-liner.
Sweetheart, that could be the name of my autobiography. What's the mileage count between Tennessee and Miami?
832 miles.
Very nice.
I'm good like that.
Honestly, I hate working here. They are so weird.
I will say, these extremis soldiers don't fully work for me, as their limits are not very well understood. Loads of superhero movies have disposable goons and sub-bosses and hordes of creatures, that's fine. But their actual weaknesses are so unclear. Shoot someone's head off? They're good. Shoot their heart? Dead. Blow them up? They'll walk it off. But what if you blow them up? Dead. I can suspend my disbelief on their insane powers, but they storm through everything like invincible Terminators right up until it's convenient for them to die. So it takes some of the wind out of the sails for me. But then we have moments like...
Walk away from that, you son of a bitch.
Which felt almost like dodge this from Trinity in The Matrix. I can't help it, that shit is too awesome to not love. The scene of Tony needing to save 13 people as they drop from the sky is incredibly tense. What needs to happen and with a clear limit and ticking clock all make it simple and effective. It's a nice quick inclusion for some additional action and feels like a cool one-up from him pulling that pilot's chute in Iron Man 1. Plus it's capped with...
All right, Jarvis, but it's only half done with
which is so unexpected. I've seen this movie before and I still jumped a little with this like, what just happened moment. And as I mentioned, the third act is just light years better than the previous two movies. The Iron Legion is epic, showing off their unique little twists and tricks that Tony had been messing around with. He's running around, hopping between suits, spending half the battle without a suit at all. It's all so fun and totally over the top, it's just bonkers in the best way. But maybe he could have summoned these suits for help back when his mansion was first attacked? Just saying. But I really don't have any complaints here. Rhodey saving the president is a cool bit of heroic action. Tony versus Killian on the bridge is a great little mashup. Tony's almost never taking the obvious route. Pepper getting dropped makes your heart skip a beat. Tony uses a rocket-boosted backslap, and there's still room to laugh with the Mark 42 crashing on return, only to then still actually be used as a final payoff. This movie's really careful about those setups and inclusions. Right through to Pepper's finishing move and final line to Killian, it's all just rad. The whole thing is thrilling, fun, and just better executed than the last two Iron Man finales. And while on some level it's almost sad, and maybe short-sighted, to see him destroy all his suits, it's a fun visual and caps off the movie's themes nicely. It's actually surprising how contained this movie ends up feeling. It was a wise decision to balance the superhero stakes with these personal ones. Basically, ever since they've done the Avengers movie, we all have to wonder to ourselves, why aren't they teaming back up again to deal with this new threat? This time, it was so closely linked to Tony, professionally and personally, there really wasn't room for anyone else. Making my way through the things I liked in this movie means I've pretty well covered about 90% of it. So I'll have a capper section again where I try to address a few other things I didn't mention elsewhere. I've kind of brought up the humor a few points already, but in general, I found this movie delightfully funny. But it also knows to sprinkle it in and let more serious moments play out. Things are a little off-kilter in a very Shane Black way, but that's refreshing among other Marvel movies in that regard. I even found most of Harley's lines and inclusions pretty funny. The movie somehow avoids annoying little kid syndrome. And in general, that distinct personality and style of this movie within the larger MCU is much appreciated. This movie doesn't get enough credit for standing out among the concrete palette of this Marvel era. Directors like James Gunn and Taika Waititi get all the credit for rising above the film factory and creating a product that's distinct within the Marvel movies but right at home in their own filmography, and Shane Black equally made his movie stand out. I like the idea that Happy got upgraded to head of security. Obviously, being Iron Man's bodyguard would result in people laughing at you. But he might not really understand his job or jurisdiction. He thinks this dude stole something and just openly punches him in the streets. That's assault, dude. I kind of think Favreau might have asked to be given a reduced role in this movie because he ends up in the hospital and we don't really see him again. This random fanboy character is hilarious, and my brain melted trying to comprehend the idea that he got a tattoo of a doll of Tony he made. What?
It's just stupid enough to be great. The music stood out to me as being amazing throughout, straight through to that end credits tune. I love the original Iron Man theme. It's a shame they just kind of ditched that one. Marvel's kind of always been bad for not giving their characters these unique themes that we can follow through these different series. The one they replaced it with in Iron Man 2 felt like it belonged in a western or something. It's kind of forgettable, but the Iron Man 3 main theme might actually be the best out of all of them. It's swelling, triumphant, and straight up heroic. I love the little end credit reveal that he's just been speaking to Bruce the whole time. Some of my favorite end credit scenes are these stingers rather than setting up whole other movies. It cracks me up, and it's great fan service. I do have one final complaint to go along with the end of this movie. Everything moves along at such a great pace, and we're juggling some interesting characters and action. And then after, it's all wrapped up in about 3 minutes. Right at the end, it's like, oh right, Pepper was cured, Happy is fine, the shrapnel was removed, Harley's still alone without a real goodbye, but at least he has cool gear now. The main thing I would want from this movie is to merge Killian and Maya, to tighten up that story and make a little more room for the emotional payoffs and wrap up at the tail end of this movie. But overall, Iron Man 3 is different, engaging, action-packed, fun and funny, experimental, and actually allows Tony Stark to be physically and emotionally vulnerable. I've slept on this movie so hard. A decent amount of time has passed since first putting this video together, and I've debated this back and forth for a couple weeks now, but at the time of recording, I've settled on giving this movie an 8.5. I'm doing it. I'm staking the claim that this is the best Iron Man movie. I'm far from the first to say so, but I did not expect my opinion to change that radically. And honestly, that makes me excited for the entire remainder of this MCU rewatch. What else have I been wrong about? Now, as if this video hasn't been long enough, I would like to sum up a few of my thoughts. Iron Man 1 is a near perfect origin for both Tony Stark and Iron Man. It's a hard movie not to love, and the impact it had on superhero movies and blockbusters while setting the stage for the literal biggest movie franchise of all time really can't be overstated. It mostly loses marks for its bland third act. Iron Man 2 is a sloppy follow-up. The movie cannot decide what the hell it wants to be and half-asses multiple storylines, while pulling its punch on what could have been a really important low point for Tony. The pre-Avengers build-up doesn't get in the way, but it doesn't add anything. The movie is enjoyable thanks to Downey and the rest of the cast, as well as key efforts from Favreau. But having seen it like 3 times now, I'm fully confident it's not for me. Iron Man 3 was a genuine shock to return to. Maybe my tastes have changed, or after 20 movies of heroes punching things and winning, it was a refresher to see Tony struggle mentally, emotionally, and physically. Putting him constantly on the ropes here was fantastic, and it unpacks some deep topics while keeping the movie both fun and exciting. Despite 3 dramatically distinct and separate acts, the pacing somehow remains great, and it's the only movie that kept me fully entertained end to end. It added a unique style, great sense of humor, an incredible score, and ended it all with a bang. It's a hair's margin, but I am now willing to immortalize my opinion in this movie that it is the best Iron Man. So, we already have some major shifts taking place in my all-time MCU ranking. Next up, I'll be doing the Captain America trilogy. Yes, the Incredible Hulk and Thor came out first, but I want the Iron Man and Captain America trilogies stacked up against each other, considering the central role these characters came to play across the franchise, with its own internal climax in Civil War, which Hulk and Thor are absent for. So it kind of works out to do it this way. I'll rank and review that trilogy, as well as at the end of that video, ranking all 6 movies so far. Hey, we're flying through these, aren't we? Woohoo! I'll continue to add to that, and by the end of the year, I should have a fully ranked and reviewed Infinity Saga. Then we can go from there. It's really going to depend on how well received these videos are, and how motivated I am to keep making them. Let me know what you guys think. I'll be very curious to see what people agree and disagree on. All of this is going to be incredibly subjective, so I'm expecting a wide array of opinions. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to patrons of the channel for their additional support, and I hope to see you all again soon.